The movie begins with Duke Evans, an NSA engineer, losing his job because the NSA no longer sees his value. To start fresh, Duke moves with his wife, Leslie, and their daughter to a house he inherited from his recently deceased grandfather. On a moving day, the family heads to their new home. Leslie stops at a local store to buy their daughter ice cream, but the store only accepts cash. At the same time, Duke finds his card isn't working and must pay cash. Despite this, they proceed to their remote cottage. Leslie worries about Duke being unemployed and their future, but he reassures her. Their daughter explores upstairs and screams, thinking she saw something. Her parents rush to help, but she didn't see anything. However, Duke notices the closet moving and suspects someone is inside. Soon after, his sister arrives. Believing there's an intruder, Duke asks his sister to take the little girl out for a treat. Despite Leslie's objections, they leave. Duke calls the police, who find a Mexican man named Alonso inside the house. Alonso insists he was the grandfather's caretaker and was left in charge of the house until the Duke claimed it. The police confirm Alonso is not trespassing, so they can't arrest him. Meanwhile, Duke's sister Jessica and the little girl get ice cream. Near an ATM, the little girl sees a plane flying unusually low. Back at the cottage, as Duke and the police talk, the same low-flying plane crashes nearby. The police rush to investigate, leaving everyone shocked and confused. Jessica and the little girl head home, singing and laughing. A neighbor, who knows Alonso, also saw the crash and spoke to him. Suddenly, another plane crashes nearby, making the situation scarier. Duke hurries everyone inside and tries to contact Jessica, but the loud music and poor signal prevent communication. Duke grows frantic and looks for a landline to call his colleague Phil, but the lines are down. The TV broadcasts an emergency message from the president, announcing that over 5,000 planes have crashed in a deliberate attack. Before he can provide more details, the signal cuts off, replaced by a red symbol. Duke disassembles his phone, finding a chip labeled "Made in China," and destroys it along with the others' phones. Leslie, panicking about their daughter, begs Duke to find them. Duke promises to do so and instructs Leslie and Alonso to collect water in every container they can find. Jessica and the little girl's car breaks down, forcing them to walk home. They witness the city's destruction, making the journey long and exhausting. Duke and the old man find Jessica's empty car but are stopped by local sheriffs, who arrest them despite Duke's plea. They are taken to a station prison for resisting the police. As night falls, Leslie worries about Duke, Jessica, and their daughter. Unable to communicate well with Alonso, she considers searching for them herself, but Alonso insists on going. Jessica, after a long walk, meets two suspicious men and escapes into the forest with the girl. The men find and assault them, taking the girl away. Jessica escapes and finds the sheriffs, who take her home. Leslie, seeing the car, runs out but only finds Jessica, who tells her what happened. The sheriff tries the cottage's water well, but it doesn't work. Leslie tends to Jessica's wounds as she explains the ordeal. The next morning, Duke and the old man are released. The sheriff explains the new order. A red wristband acts as a passport for food and water, but it's costly. Duke goes home, where Alonso has rescued the girl. Leslie thanks Alonso for his help. Duke disassembles the wristband, distrusting it. The old man brings a gun and a radio, hoping to learn more, but communication remains down. Duke theorizes that China, upset over unpaid loans, is behind the attack, using chips in devices to black out electronics. He shows the "Made in China" chip, worrying everyone. As night falls, they gather limited canned food and water. Leslie suggests Duke use the wristband to get supplies, but he refuses, unsure of its safety. Emma, thirsty, drinks toilet water as their situation worsens. Duke tries to fix the radio while Leslie worries about their food supply. She breaks a plate in frustration, urging Duke to focus on their immediate needs. She leaves potatoes on the table, sparking an idea in Duke's mind. The next morning, he uses lots and lots of potatoes on the table to try and make use of them to get some signal. It somehow works for him, and we see a spark of hope in his eyes. Meanwhile, as expected, the toilet water runs out, and Emma is once again thirsty. Leslie is desperate to find water, so she gets up to go out. Duke insists he goes instead of her, but when he does, what he finds in the store is a disaster. People got there before him and fought over what was left in the store. Now, with no water to take back, he returns empty-handed. Leslie embraces him, apologizing for last night as well. Inside, however, Duke can't gamble with what's left in the house, so he decides Alonso is an extra mouth to feed and throws him out of the house. Leslie pleads with him not to, as Alonso saved Emma's life, but Duke makes his choice. Shortly after, as the day went on, the family began to starve and dehydrate. A sheriff from the police station came to see them, but Duke told him the water well had been broken for over a year. Inside, Jessica picked up the red wristband and put it on to get them food. The wristband was then locked in and claimed she was an official citizen of the new republic. But before they moved their muscles, they heard guns being shot repeatedly from a distance. They got scared, and Duke insisted on going to check. Just then, he saw a bunch of intruders barging into the old man's house. They came to get what they needed and didn't hesitate to attack anybody that resisted them. Duke sneaked inside from the back door and found out that they had killed the old man. Not having the privilege to grieve, he took a gun out of the man's back and headed outside. Meanwhile, the intruders had spotted Duke's cottage, so they decided to go there and see what they could find. Duke rushed to his house before the men got there, but while he was running, he slipped and fell, losing the gun in his hand. He couldn't spot it, so he quickly rushed to get his family. Once inside, he escorted them under the house, and at first, they were not found. However, the intruders soon found them and captured Emma and Leslie. Duke screamed for their rescue, and to his luck, the local sheriffs arrived just in time before they were harmed. They lined the intruders up and started questioning them, asking them where their Freedom Citizen wristbands were. The fat sheriff was especially concerned about them not having their wristbands. He only saw Jessica wearing the band, so he let her move freely and allowed her to take Emma inside. As for the others, he shockingly started to shoot them from the back while Leslie and Duke stood there witnessing it, shocked. He then turned his attention to the duo, asking them where their wristbands were. When Leslie asked for water and food, he told her, "No band, no supplies." When she argued with him, he slapped her and warned Duke not to make any more trouble, or else he would shoot him dead right there. He then insisted they bring him water from their well, but Duke explained it had been over a year since it stopped working. The sheriff didn't care and only gave them a limited time to provide him with water from the well. The night went terribly for the couple, but they comforted each other to get through it. The next morning, they went back to the well to fix it, but while they were doing so, Jessica came out and insisted she get food from somewhere. However, just when she walked a little, the wristband announced she was passing the boundary. She dismissed it easily and headed on her way, but soon it started to burn her hand, and she began to have seizures and convulsions. The duo approached her and tried to cut off the wristband, but it was unbreakable. She ended up dead just like that, and Duke was left with her corpse. Terrified and devastated, he dug up a huge hole and buried her in the backyard. He found a gun while digging as well and kept it, regardless of feeling defeated by all the odds. Inside the house, the family was shortly visited by two little starving kids. They asked for food and water, but Leslie could only give them raw potatoes. Emma was getting weaker and weaker from dehydration. Duke and her mother tried to get her any drop of liquid they could find in the house. They found some drops and let her drink it, but it was dirty water. Just then, while they were hopeless and helpless, the radio signaled Duke was working on letting someone through. Duke, excited, headed to the table and tried to respond. Fortunately, he heard Phil's voice from the other end telling him that they needed him as soon as possible. He told him there was a power outage all over the world, and they would soon come and get them. Now the duo was relieved, and at night a military car arrived at the cottage asking if he was the NSA engineer Duke Evans. He said yes, and the troops demanded he come with them alone. Duke, confused, asked them if they had space for his wife and Emma. When they refused to take them, Duke shut the door behind him, choosing to die with them. However, the troops dragged him out of the house without his consent, handcuffed him with the red wristbands, and then took him with them. Waking up, Duke found himself in an interrogation room in front of Phil. Phil was wearing the red wristband and told Duke wearing it didn't mean they were on the wrong side. Duke screamed at him, calling him a traitor, but Phil put him back on his chair. Despite his anger, Duke tried to explain that the red band killed Jessica and could never be in their favor. But Phil brought out the chips that were made in China and found in every electronic device Americans used. It was the virus inside the chips that caused the blackout and everything that went down that day. To Duke's surprise, the assembly code written on the chips was formulated by Duke while he worked as an NSA engineer. Terrifying flashbacks of the plane crashes and disasters appeared on Duke's face as he realized it was his own hands that brought the disaster upon the country. Now Phil's request was for Duke to reboot the system as it cracked. He had a backdoor, another assembly code to reboot it. In case he refuses, Phil shows Duke Leslie and Emma captured in a room and used as a bargaining chip for the assembly codes. Duke quickly agreed to reboot it and gave them the backdoor code that allowed the security breach. Once Phil got it done, he told him he was free to move around with the band in his hand as long as he was inside the Republic. They then dropped Duke off at his cottage and left him with a box of water bottles. He rushed inside to get Leslie and Emma, but he only came across Alonso, who had come to pack up his bags. But before they could have a conversation, The sheriff who ordered him to fix the well came to the front door. He noticed the box of water and insisted he would take it if the well wasn't fixed. This time, he was ready to shoot, but Duke, having had enough of words, took out the gun he found in the backyard and shot the sheriff repeatedly. He killed him once and for all, and just then Leslie and Emma arrived at the cottage. They rushed to Duke, and he embraced them, now that they were cleared of all the threats. Duke then took out a bottle of water and a snack from the box and gave it to Alonso, suggesting he could stay with them as he was a loyal good person. Finally, the group decided to leave the cottage as it was no longer safe, and Alonso said they could leave for Mexico as he had family there. They packed up their things and soon started to drive for Mexico. Once they arrived at the border, Alonso found a way out to the other side and showed them the way. However, Duke was still worried about the red band he was wearing, so he took out a chainsaw and insisted Alonso cut off his hand. Initially skeptical and hesitant, Alonso cut off Duke's hand where the band was announcing Duke was off limits and boundary. Duke screamed in pain, and Leslie covered Emma's ears so she wouldn't hear his anguish. Shortly, they arrived at Alonso's family house, and he greeted his wife and children. The movie ends as we see Duke's hand in a bandage, and Leslie and Emma alongside him in New Mexico in the comfort of Alonso's house. With that, the movie ends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.